welcome back to my channel and to another video. I hope you're all well and you're having a good day. Today I thought I'd share with you my top 5 dress sewing patterns. So if you do watch my videos regularly or if you follow me over on Instagram, you'll know that I'm a big fan of making dresses. I've made so many in my sewing journey, I can't even remember how many I've made or even dare to guess. I love to wear dresses, particularly in the summertime and also sometimes in the winter with leggings and tights and things like that. I just think there's nothing more comfortable than a lovely floaty dress. So I thought I'd share my top 5 dress sewing patterns with you today. So if you are new to my channel, I post lots of sewing content. I love to talk about things I've made. I love to talk about sewing plans and fabric hauls and things like that. If you aren't already subscribed to my channel, I'd love you to consider subscribing, and if you do enjoy this video, please do give it a like at the end. So with all that said, let's get into my top 5 sewing patterns for dresses. So my first pattern that I wanted to share with you is actually what I'm wearing, and that is the Myosotis Dress by Deer & Doe. So this one is one that I had admired from afar for a long time before I actually gave it a go. And then once I've made it, I thought, why didn't I do this earlier? Because I absolutely love it. So there are 2 variations to this pattern. Basically, it's a really relaxed style shirt dress. It's got a shirt style bodice. And then it has a really sweet little mandarin collar, and then you can make it either short sleeved, or there are pattern pieces for this lovely frill sleeve detail as well, and then you can either make it just with a sort of A-line gathered skirt, or you can make it with the A-line skirt slightly shorter and you can add a frill to it. So those are the 2 styles given in the pattern. In terms of sizing, the sizes range from a size 34 up to a 46. A size 34 is a bust 31, waist 23 and hip 33. And bust 41, a waist 33 and a hip 43. I think if you're going to be making this pattern, definitely take into consideration the finished garment measurements, because this dress is very oversized. So for example, I made the size 34 for the dress that I'm wearing. I'm definitely not a waist size 23, but even making the smallest size, there's plenty of ease in this pattern. So as I say, definitely check and go on the finished garment measurements for this pattern rather than your actual measurements, because I have heard a lot of people say that this dress comes up very oversized on them. It is supposed to be oversized, but if you are a bit wary of how oversized it's going to be, then just double check the finished garment measurements. So what I love about this pattern is I love shirt dresses anyway. Shirt dresses are definitely my favourite, and I really like the neckline on this one. So you can see from what I'm wearing that it's actually just a really lovely V-neck. It's not too low, and I just find it sits really nicely and comfortable on me, and I feel nice and comfortable in it. I don't feel too exposed in it or anything. And also I can be a bit funny about things being too high or too tight around my neck, so this collar is perfect for me as well. So I've made 3 different versions of the Myosotis dress pattern now. I've made the version that I'm wearing, and I've made a short sleeve version, and I've also made a hacked midi length version as well. So I'll talk about the first version that I ever made first. So for my first version, I decided to make version B, which was just the standard short sleeve version. But I wanted my skirt to have a tiered skirt effect. So I played around with the skirt part of the pattern and also the frill, and I resized them slightly just to make the frill a little bit higher and the skirt a little bit shorter, just so that the skirt looked a bit more like a tiered skirt rather than a skirt and frill that this is now. So not a huge change, but just something that I changed to make the dress a little bit more wearable for me. And for my second version, which is what I'm wearing, I actually just added a long sleeve on this one, and I've elasticated it just to give it a little bit of a more puffy effect. And I've kept everything else the same as my first version, so I've kept the tiered skirts that I resized, and I've just added a long sleeve, and I think that just makes it a little bit more wearable for the winter time. But it's also quite a nice one for sort of transition from spring to summer or summer to autumn. You can still wear it with sort of bare legs and trainers or sandals or whatever. In the summer just gone, I decided to play around with the pattern again, and I've just used again a version B bodice with the short sleeves, and I've just added a longer tiered skirt, and that worked really well as a midi dress. So that's one of the reasons why I've included this pattern in my most favourite patterns for dresses, is because it's so hackable. I really like the pattern pieces that you get in this. It's really easy to play around and change things up, and I really like how versatile it is, and that's why the Myosotis dress has made it into my top 5 patterns. So number 2, my top 5 dress patterns. These aren't in any order or anything particularly, it's just the order that I found them in. Number 2 is the Eve dress by Sew Over It. So the Sew Over It Eve dress is a really lovely 1920s style wrap dress. You can make it either with a high-low hem or a straight hem like this one here, and then you can play around with the sleeve details, and you can either have a straight sleeve or you can have a really lovely flutter sleeve detail like this one has here. There's also a really pretty vintage style yoke detail to the shoulders as well, and then the fronts of your wraps are actually gathered into that little yoke detail at the front, and it's a really lovely sew. And I think for me, because I'm quite speedy and I always like to get to the end of a project, it's quite a nice one that makes you slow down. You have to think a little bit more, and you also have to be patient, because if you do make this out of a drapey fabric like a rayon or something like that, I've learned through trial and error that you need to let the hem of this hang, because it can stretch out of shape slightly. Because where some of the skirt is cut on the bias, you need to let it hang so that it will drop, and then you can level off the skirt and get it all nice and level. So it isn't one that you can get on with and finish in a day, but I think for me that's really nice because it makes you slow down and take your time. So in terms of sizing for this one, the sizes range from a size 8 to a size 20. You do need quite a lot of fabric for this one because the skirt is really quite wide. It's quite a full circle skirt. So the back is like a full circle skirt, and then there are 2 half circle skirts for the front pieces. And they are really quite wide because they sort of flare out and hand movements there. They kind of flare out into a full circle, so you need to have quite a wide piece of fabric when you're making this dress. You do learn a few different techniques in there. You have to stay the neckline, which means that you need to attach some stay tape all around the V front just so that that doesn't stretch out. And I just find that this dress is just a really lovely flattering wrap dress. You know, with some wrap dresses, they can gape open or you can feel a little bit as if you're going to fall out of them. I don't feel like that with this dress at all. I feel like it's really quite modest. The neckline of the V comes up quite high, and it's just really nice and comfortable to wear. And also you don't feel like if there's any wind around that your skirt's going to flap open because the front skirt pieces are quite wide and they give a lot of coverage. So that's why I love the Eve dress pattern. So number 3 had to be in there somewhere, didn't it, is the Darling Ranges dress by Megan Nielsen. So you'll know, if you've watched me in the past, how much I love this pattern. I counted up how many different versions I'd made of this pattern last night, and I've actually made 9 different versions. So I've made 2 3/4 length sleeve versions like the one on the cover. I've made 3 short sleeve versions. I've made 2 tops. And I've made a midi dress version as well. Does that add up to 9? I can't work it out. Oh no, I've made 2 sleeveless versions as well. Hopefully that adds up to 9. It should be 9. But anyway, I've made lots of different versions of this dress and I absolutely love it. There are actually 3 different versions of this pattern. There is the bodice with the elasticated 3/4 length sleeves. It's a fitted bodice with a couple of darts at the waist, and then the sleeves are elasticated, or you can of course make them short sleeved if you prefer. And then the dress skirt buttons all the way down, and it's a kind of fit and flare A-line kind of skirt. So obviously you can make that version, and then you can actually make a blouse version of the top as well. So you use the dress bodice version and then you just lengthen it down into a blouse pattern, and it looks really similar to the dress. And you can also make this version, version 3, which is actually a straight version of the dress, which I've never actually made. But I think this summer I'm actually going to put it on my list to make sure that I do make this one this year, because I'd really like to try it and see how it looks on me. So those are the 3 versions that the pattern gives you to make. But for me, I think there's just so much hacking potential with this pattern. I think you can mix and match things. I've actually made 2 versions from viscose. The first one I ever made was actually from a viscose, and when I made it, I wasn't quite sure if I liked it because there wasn't a lot of shape to it and it felt a bit like a nightie. But actually, I've mentioned recently actually that it's probably one of my most worn dresses in the summer, because it's just really lovely and floaty in the summer and it's really cool to wear. But I do think this dress works best in a more stable fabric like a chambray or a cotton or something, because you just get that lovely shaping detail in the button down dress and skirt, and it's really nice to get the pressing detail right, and it looks really crisp and nice in a more stable fabric. So in terms of hacking this pattern, I've actually made a peplum style blouse using this pattern, and to make that I just used the bodice of the dress. I shortened the sleeve and just gave it a short sleeve, and then instead of adding the full skirt I just cut my skirt pattern piece, or I might not have even used the skirt pattern piece actually, I might have just cut a rectangle, and I gathered it into the bottom of that blouse piece, and then I just made a really cute little peplum blouse. I've also used the bodice again and added on a different skirt and made a midi tiered length version of this dress, which I also love, and I wore that quite a lot back in the summer last year, and I'm hoping to wear that a lot again this year because I love how that turned out. So hacking potential is definitely one reason why I've included this in the list. But also I just think it's one of those patterns which looks as though it might be quite involved and complicated, but actually it comes together really nicely. I love how it's finished. So basically you finish your button band and then the neckline is all bias bound and it comes together really neatly and really quickly. And I also think the instructions given in this pattern are really clear and really concise, and yeah, really great if you are a beginner that's looking to sort of up your sewing game and improve your skills and things and try something new. I think this would be a really good one to try. Next on the list is the Lydia Dress by Tilly and the Buttons. So this is another one that I really fell in love with again when they released it last year. Was it only last year? I think it was, yeah. It's another really lovely shirt dress, and this one is described as a romantic shirt dress, and I think that's a really good description because you've got the sort of formal bodice here with the proper shirt collar. The collar is on a stand and everything, and it's like a proper shirt. And then you've got the really lovely floaty romantic skirt that you can sew, and then there's also the option, if you don't want that sort of floaty tiered skirt, to sew a straighter skirt. Which is just gathered into the waist, and it should fall at knee length, but obviously you can lengthen or shorten it to however you want it. So yeah, really love the Lydia dress. I think it's the perfect shirt dress. It's really hackable again. There's lots of mix and match elements, so you can swap the sleeves around. You can have long sleeves or short sleeves or midi length sleeves if you want to shorten the long sleeves slightly. And then you can play around with the skirts as well, so you can have a knee length skirt or you can have a midi or maxi dress like I have, and it turns out differently again depending on what kind of fabric you use. So obviously if you use a really structured fabric, then your ruffles, you're going to get a lot of sort of detail and puffiness and things in your ruffles, and they'll really stand out. But if you use a more drapey fabric like a viscose or a rayon or something, then you'll get a really nice floaty effect like on the front of the pattern here, where it's just really swishy and lovely. So as with all Tilly patterns, the sizes range from a UK 6 to a UK 24. And I really wanted to include this pattern because since I've owned it, I've used the pattern pieces for lots of different things, not only to make the pattern as it is. So I made a Lydia dress as it was from the pattern, and I used the tiered version of the pattern, similar to the one on the front here, but I made the short sleeve version. And I did find that it came up quite long on me, so I needed to shorten it. But this dress is just one that I absolutely love. I'm really proud of it. It was actually the first time I ever sewed a proper collar on a stand, and the instructions are just fab. They're really, really good. They hold your hand the whole way through. There's lots of coloured illustrations and photographs and things to help you along the way. And as always with Tilly patterns, everything's drafted really nicely and really well, so everything came together really easily. I did have to play around with the skirt pattern pieces slightly just because they came up a little bit too long on me. But yeah, I really love this pattern. And as I say, I wanted to include this one because I have used it to hack other patterns with. So when I needed to play around with my skirt pattern pieces, I resized the two tiers to make them more midi length on me. So basically I shortened the top tier and then I lengthened the bottom tier to make the skirt right for me. And since then I've used those skirt pattern pieces to add to all of my other favourite bodices, including the Myosotis dress and the Darling Ranges dress, just to make a really lovely midi length skirt, or dress I should say. So I also have plans to have another go at a hack using this pattern, and I'd really like to try using the shirt bodice and attaching it to a pair of trousers, like the sapphire trousers or something like that. I think that would be a really good fun hack to try. So maybe I'll try that one in the summer. So that's pattern number 4, the Tilly and the Buttons Lydia dress. And then last in my list I have another Tilly pattern, and it's the Tilly and the Buttons Indigo dress. So this is another really popular one, and it's one that I really love as well because I think it's just a really good basic sort of smock style baby doll type dress. If I show you the line drawings on the back, you can see the different options that there are available. So basically you can make a lovely straight sleeved baby doll dress with a pretty sort of fit and flare gathered skirt. There's also the option to add a frill around the sleeves as well, so you can have a sort of elbow length straight sleeve and then with an added frill on the bottom. You can also make a kind of tunic length top as well if you don't want to go for the full dress. So there are lots of options available there. And there are other details that you can play around with and try as well. So you can see from the pattern piece here, on the top that the model's wearing, there's an exposed gather around the front there and around the frills on the sleeve. And that is such a simple thing to do. So you're basically just turning your gather inside out and you're gathering on the front of the dress instead of on the inside, but it looks really lovely and really effective. I had a go at that on one of my Indigo dresses and it was a bit fiddly, but I really like the result. So I've actually made one version of the dress with the frill sleeve, which I love, and that's got the exposed gather on. And I also actually made another dress version, which I ended up cutting into a really short peplum top. And I love the top much more than I love the skirt. Basically, I tried to add a frill onto the skirt and it hadn't quite worked. The fabric was a little bit too heavy, so it just wasn't very comfortable to wear. So I ended up cutting that skirt into a really short peplum top. And actually that worked really nicely, and it's definitely a top that I'd like to make again at some point. So as well as those two versions, I've also made a midi length version of the Indigo dress. And to do that, I've simply used the Indigo bodice, and then I've added on my midi Lydia Dress skirt. So I've used the pattern pieces from the Lydia Dress just to add on to the Indigo dress bodice, and that gave me a really nice, really comfy and cool midi dress, and I was really pleased with how that turned out as well. So I've included the Indigo pattern just because, again, I think it's really lovely and really versatile. There's lots of good pattern pieces in there that you can mix and match with other patterns and that you can swap up and change around depending on the kind of effect and the kind of dress or top you're after. I think this is a really good one for beginners as well because there's not a lot of details in there really. There's no fastenings, you don't need to worry about zips or buttons or anything like that. There's just a couple of darts, a bit of gathering and a lovely facing that finishes the neckline, and you can simply put it over your head. So I do think it's a really good one for sort of adventurous beginners or advanced beginners. And I love anything that's sort of really floaty and comfortable to wear, so this one definitely gets my vote. So that's my roundup of my top 5 dress sewing patterns. Let me know what your favourite dress patterns in the comments below because I'd really like to know. It's always interesting to see which patterns we tend to get out and use time and time again. And I know that with those patterns, they're definitely the ones that I reach for when I want something to sew that I just know is going to work. And I'll also go to them from time to time when I want to include different elements on other dresses and things that I'm making as well. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and do give the video a like if you've enjoyed it. Have a lovely day and I'll look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye!